afternoon, everyone. If you're based in India, good afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us. Today, it's going to be a great chat. I'm pretty excited to have a chat because this industry, which I have been closely looking from my childhood. I mean, I've seen a lot of SMEs operating out of Madurai, where I'm from, and I'm excited to speak with Deepak to explore this much more on how he's going about and building a B2B marketplace for Bharat. So without any further ado, let's get started. So I'm Shri, I'm your host today, and I take care of Freshworks startup program for APJ market. A little bit about Freshworks before we get started. We are a B2B SaaS company. We are headquartered in San Mateo. We typically help companies with their customer experience and employee experience needs. And within Freshworks for startups, we help startups to get started with their journey with access to $10,000 in credits on Freshworks tools, access to mentorship. We bring in leaders like Deepak over here to share their journey and also any other challenges which you face. We try and focus that under the mentorship umbrella. And the third thing which we do is access to our ecosystem. So if you're raising funds, please reach out to us. We would be more than happy to evaluate you and try and connect you with some of our partners. That's quickly about Freshworks and Freshworks Startup Program. Now, hopping on into the topic of the day, we are going to be speaking with Deepak Wadhwa, who is co-founder and CEO of Locofast. Locofast is actually a B2B textile marketplace, one of the fastest growing across the globe. They're actually trying to connect SMEs, MSMEs with large manufacturers within the textile industry. And very recently, they raised their Series A and from Stellaris and a bunch of other leading funds within India. I'm super excited to learn more about their journey. Deepak, he has been a serial entrepreneur. After making his mark in the travel and leisure space, he went about and starting this new journey of setting up Locofast. So Deepak, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to roll off the questions which I have in place for you. But could you share a little bit about like what you do, what you like, and where are you based, and how are things for you?
Well, thank you so much, Sri, and thank you, Freshworks, for an opportunity to speak to you. I'm really excited to answer the question that you have. Hopefully, those are easy questions for me to answer. But no, thank you so much. I think it's a warm day here in Delhi. That's where we are based out of.
Okay.
Right now, we are Delhi-based, and it's the middle of the week. So probably a good welcome change for us from the otherwise heavy duty execution that we do through the week. I think a good sort of a change. So really looking forward to having a chat with you and some of the listeners on the podcast.
Awesome. Cool. Great. Okay. When we went through this journey of learning more about Locofast and thinking about what should we be asking you, the first thing came to our mind was, okay, so you were mainly into the travel and leisure space. And that's altogether like a total opposite of what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
How did this happen? Like how from building WeAreHolidays, and then how did you identify this textile industry as a space? And then what are the learnings which you took from WeAreHolidays and which has helped you setting up Locofast and building Locofast so far?
Yeah. No, I think obviously in your second venture, if ever, for most entrepreneurs would agree with that, I think you're much smarter in the second time around than first time around. Well, yes, that's not more of a general statement, but I think just quickly the background, right? I mean, I'll quickly cover where I come from, right? So I'm a third generation entrepreneur, where my grandfather migrated from Pakistan back at the time of independence. Mm-hmm. And like many other, refugees back then, probably setting up everything from scratch, from the 50s, setting up small business. Then my father, he also has a business. I come from a background where my father has a small SME manufacturing business. So technically, I'm the third generation, entrepreneur in the true essence. My grandfather being the first true entrepreneur for the family, followed by my father, and now me. But and most of my cousins, uncles, distant relatives, about almost all of them are in some way or the other involved in some business or the other. Most of them are either running SME manufacturing businesses or trading businesses. So I would say that I think that's been the training since the beginning, right? I mean, I've been surrounded by people that run businesses. I've been surrounded by people that run SMEs. I've been surrounded by people that have built things from scratch. And I think that's really the training. And, you do not realize that, but I think somewhere there is entire, framework in mind is built around some of those things. But I would basically credit to my stint at Make My Trip when all of this basically came together, right? I think as a young 20-year-old, you are extremely confused, right? Things really don't come together in a way how. But I think Make My Trip was that place. And I just feel when I joined Make My Trip, it wasn't as big a company as it is today. Got to work really closely, even with the founders at Make My Trip and the leadership team there. I feel that's where everything came together, where you could actually believe that instead of working for a startup, you can actually go on to start your own company, right? So I just feel that's really how things really came together. And I feel the biggest manifestation of culture is if you're able to inspire, entrepreneurs, or if you're able to inspire people to go on to start companies, right? I just think Make My Trip has successfully done that, at least for me. I'm extremely happy to be doing what I'm doing. And I would have no hesitation in saying that if it wasn't for Make My Trip, I would have still been figuring out what exactly is the calling, right? So I think that's really, it all adds up from that point of view. The fact that, I come from a business family. I have a lot of uncles that, a lot of relatives that do that. But everything really came together when I landed Make My Trip. And I just feel once you're at, and as a young 25-year-old, back then, this is 10, 11, where the ecosystem wasn't as matured as it is today, right? So I just felt that I think being in travel and understanding the space deeply, obviously the inclination or obviously the understanding of the space was an added plus that I had when I started WeAreHolidays. What we basically were building out is, again, a marketplace for holidays, where we had mom and pop travel agents on the supply side and customer like you and me on the demand side. So that is really what we built out and scaled that a fair bit before exiting to a large travel strategic sometime in 2017 mid. And I would say that I think the year and a half, to answer to your question, in the middle of 2017, when I was on a sabbatical, is when really figuring out the right opportunity, because I just feel, as an entrepreneur, once an entrepreneur, I feel always an entrepreneur, right? I was still inkling to get started again. I just absolutely loved the journey that we had at WeAreHolidays. And as a personality and as an individual, I just feel that it gives me a tremendous amount of pleasure and satisfaction to be able to build something from scratch. So it was a no-brainer that I wanted to start up again. And why textile? A quick background is when I was basically at sabbatical and basically doing nothing, my father asked me to why not come to his manufacturing SME and see how we do work, right? So spent about a year and a half with him there and trying to see how and bring about any impact whatsoever in any of the businesses or any of the function that he manages. Procurement, and then lack of technology, inefficiencies, process inefficiencies, access to working capital, in general, new client acquisition. These were some of the sort of low-hanging problems, right, that were out there. And I just felt in my typical business like dhanda mindset, I could associate with the procurement problem as the problem which I resonated with. And that's really where really started spending some time. Incidentally, my uncles, my mother's side, are textile traders out of Chandni Chowk for the last 30-40 years, right? Awesome. So I think when I was looking at a problem to solve, and predominantly previous experiences had that, okay, a problem which is in a large enough market, a problem where you have a customer making repeat purchases, you have a problem where you are not really spending a lot of marketing dollars to acquire customers. All of those were the learning from the previous startup. So basically, that was the sort of framework I was looking at. But then I think the problem was closer home, where procurement as a horizontal and textile as a vertical looked like the absolute sweet spot that I wanted to spend the next 10 years of my life in. I quickly got my co-founder from my previous startup to join me here again. So both Mohit and I are here now executing Locofast, and we are a B2B fabric marketplace to procure bulk fabrics. And that's where we are, Shri.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. That's like when you were saying, like I'm just imagining how you went from this entire journey as a young kid from MMT to now building Locofast. Thank you so much. That really must inspire a lot of founders and others who are listening in. Moving on, just a quick follow-up to this entire industry, right? So, isn't it very vital for you to build trust? Like it's good that you had already some existing connects through the family, but I'm sure that was limited, right?
Yeah.
Textile as industry is quite unorganized. There are so many players. So how did you go about building that initial trust around Locofast within MSMEs? Manufacturers tend to understand because they understand, okay, you're trying to make a bridge and make the entire supply chain smaller and make it easy for them. They would understand because they are in the bigger play. But when it comes to MSMEs, what should they, like, how did you go about building that trust for a brand called Locofast with their MSMEs?
Absolutely, Shri. Very interesting question, right? And typically, whenever you start out, right, trust is obviously the biggest issue, right? Because as a platform, you have the chicken and egg problem, right? Which if you do not have supply, you don't have demand. And if you have demand, you get more supply, right? So to basically come out of that and to get the flywheel started, personally, both me and my co-founder spent a lot of time on the ground meeting a lot of suppliers, right? I think that's one thing, because at the end of the day, whatever you may do on the phone, I think a face to the story and a face to the value prop and a founder's face to the value prop in the initial days, I think I would probably have spent, if not more, about 75 to 90 days traveling from some of the textile hubs, which we spoke about just before we started. Places like where you come from, Madurai, Coimbatore, Bhiwandi, a lot of these places where we actually ended up spending time and trying to basically sell the value prop that we had, right? So I think initial days were hard in terms of being on ground. And if you really see, the interesting thing that we did was that we actually approached one cluster at a time, right? Because typically when in these clusters, and you come from that background, there you would know that the word of mouth travels much faster, both positive and negative, right? So we were very clear that if we were to create some positive word of mouth, it has to be a cluster-led approach. That's point number one. Point number two is to be as hands-on and to be as visible. And till today, I mean, we might have a large team, but till today, there are lots of suppliers that I am in regular touch with, and they're free to call me. They have my direct number. I call them, they call me. I think that's a sort of a relationship you have to build up. Not only does it help you to come over that trust, because in some way an MSME associates that, okay, here is a founder of the company talking to me. And two, it also just sets the example for the rest of the team in terms of how the vendor relationship should be managed. And I just feel for us, the entire vendor ecosystem is just so critical to us that I think just to set the right practices from very early on was very important. So I think that's really how we went about gaining the trust of the MSMEs.
True. I'm totally with you. One of our previous guests was the founder of WakeFit. He also mentioned this same thing. Like even today, like back in the days when he started, pretty much he was sitting on Amazon.com where customers are thinking like, this is not comfortable. I need a better bed. So he used to call up them and then make sure they get a better bed. So I think this is a journey of any founder who's in this particular domain, where it's like B2B2C or like B2B marketplace for consumer facing products. So I can totally understand like the kind of journey you would have gone through by traveling to different places and trying, understanding and building that trust of what they need and how you can deliver that. Yeah, totally makes sense. And another biggest very right. So we at Freshworker Startups, we meet a lot of these pre-seed companies and seed stage companies. Most of them, like, okay, they're not building a new category altogether, or they're not entering a new market altogether. But in some cases, there is a founder who is trying to build like a platform or a marketplace or a product which is going to be the first solution in that particular domain. So I know there were other marketplaces, but nothing specifically focused on the textile industry, right? I believe Locofast is one of those first movers in this particular domain. So when you started, or even today, like what are those key metrics which you keep in check while building this marketplace for a sector or a domain which was not defined earlier? Because for any other company, it's easy to look up to, say, a Google or a Facebook or a Salesforce to see like, okay, this is how I should be growing. These are the metrics I should be looking at. It is quite straightforward. But when it came to this particular industry and this particular marketplace, which are those metrics which you keep in track on a day-to-day basis, or when you started?
Sure. So I think, Shri, we are all ultimately, as founders, we are humans, right? And whatever business I might run, it could be a B2C marketplace in a previous avatar or a B2B marketplace, B2C in my previous avatar, and B2B right now. I think the fundamental thought process around running a business remains the same, right? Yeah. And I think as a founding team, between both Mohit and I, we are extremely comfortable in scenarios where there's repeat purchase, to say that we track that. We are extremely comfortable in scenarios where we are not losing money on a transaction base. We are not comfortable in businesses with large EBITDA negative businesses. That's not what we like in general. And I could be doing anything for that matter. I could be doing a B2C marketplace or a B2 marketplace. Fundamentally, some of the things that we do not associate with are some of these things, right? So I think definitely I feel, and I could compare B2C marketplace with a B2B marketplace. I just feel that in B2B marketplace, the fact that they are operationally intensive and they are such large markets, I think a founder's DNA or a founding team's DNA gets reflected more. And I would like to say that, and not a lot of may agree, but I just feel a founder's DNA, founding team's DNA resonates more with the B2B business, because that's where some of these opportunities are so large. They're just such deep pockets. Each of the niche within B2B is probably, from a TAM perspective, few billions of dollars, right? I just felt we were very clear since day one that with whatever we feel, we are going to have execution discipline around going about and executing business in this domain, because the market is just so large, right? And I just feel typically what we have and we've also made those mistakes in the past, is that we tend to underestimate the complexity and the execution capability that is required to basically at least start scratching the surface, right? So I think even though being an early, we were very clear that we wanted to follow basic principles of building a business where, we were basically at all times ensuring that what we are adding value to the customer, we are adding value to a supplier. In the process, we are making money, we are making margin on every transaction. And to say the least today, I would say that there would be less than 10 transactions in the last 2.5 years. We would have actually lost money at a transaction level. For all the other 99.5% transaction, 99.9% transaction, we're actually transaction-led positive, right? That's a good DNA, I feel. So I think as a founding team, our DNA was to build, and DNA still continues to build a sustainable business in such a deep market, which is where I feel we really need to have our execution oriented in a manner which portrays our long-term thinking and ensure there is value added to all stakeholders on the platform.
Got it. Now, so I totally agree with you on like this fact that the fundamentals of building a business is quite straightforward. Like you need to keep those things to make sure that you're not going, like as you mentioned, EBITDA negative, or like making sure you're not losing on even the smaller transactions which you have on a day-to-day basis. One of those like follow-up questions was, this is the basics of, say, running the business. But when you look at marketplaces in general, right? So a lot of your money is burned in acquiring, say, in this case, it would be MSMEs to come on board, and to make sure that the point which you mentioned, right? How do you make sure they do repeat business with you? Like what do you see that is quite similar? That is the first question. So B2C marketplaces like Amazon or Flipkart, they spend a lot of money in focusing on repeat business. But what is the case with respect to B2B? Marketing does play a good amount of role, but on top of that, are there any other levers which you look at when it comes to ensuring repeat business is happening? And are you able to reduce burn, or do you think that you need to burn? There is no other way.
Yes. So Shri, fundamentally, if you see B2 business have large order value, average order values, right? Yeah. Unlike B2C marketplaces, B2 marketplaces generally tend to have a larger size of the ticket size is much larger, or average order value is larger. To give you a context, our average order value is in few lakhs, right? I mean, that's the per transaction value that you're doing, right? And which fundamentally means that in a lot of B2B marketplaces, then you need to, especially when you're dealing with MSMEs, right? Trust is just so much important, right? And trust from both sides, right? Because we as a company would want to serve to qualified SMEs. When I say qualified, in terms of their business potential, their ability to purchase again from us, their ability to help us earn money, their ability to appreciate technology, their ability to understand the value that we're giving, right? And similarly for the SME to understand that they're actually banking on us to make a transaction of few lakhs, right? So definitely, especially from a sales perspective, we have on-ground teams in all cities that we operate in, because there has to be a face to the relationship, right? Which may or may not be the case in a B2C kind of a marketplace, right? So one, average order value is larger, which definitely means that at least in the initial days, you have to be visible to the customer, and there has to be a face to the brand, right? Which then means that it becomes extremely important for us as a team to have individuals that could go out and probably communicate the value prop of Locofast as well as I could in front of the customers, right? So I think that's one fundamental difference. When your transaction value is much larger, you have to have a face on that. Two, in a typical, and I might be covering one of the other questions that you might have, which is that in a typical B2B journey, right, you've got to understand that when you go meet a SME for the first time, or a manufacturer for the first time, or brand for the first time, the idea is that while few of them do understand, and with startup becoming more mainstream in India, I think there is far more acceptability than it was maybe 5 years back. So most of our team members and I are welcomed whenever we go talk. But I think they're very value conscious, which basically means in that the first couple of transactions, you have to show core value to the customer on why he should buy from you. And that value could be in terms of price. The value in terms of, measurable could be in terms of delivery timelines or even quality. So we are very conscious that whenever we start a new relationship, we have to ensure that the value prop gets delivered to the customer within the first couple of transactions, else the customer goes away, or in some way you're not top of mind of the customer, right? So I think it's very important to handhold the customer and in a way be able to meet or even exceed his expectation first time around when he's working with you. And then at the end of the day, the good part there, while the first transaction is harder with an SME, but the good part there is that SME at the end of the day, it's mostly they're individuals or they're owners of the business like you and me. In some way, they then tend to be on your side and tend to then support you because they know that, what they are offering me at an overall level is valuable. So I think every subsequent transaction from there on becomes a lot easier. And which is where what we've also figured out from a lot of our customers is that while some of our hardest customers, people that basically would call me at like 10 o'clock at night and say, listen, your delivery has not happened, are now such big proponents of our value prop. And that transition I've seen from my own eyes, right? So a very interesting segment is what we're dealing with. Hard on the outside. And, once you start serving, they are your biggest advocates, right?
True. In SaaS, we call this the flywheel effect. Your customers become your advocates and then they add back to your pipeline. But India as a market, as you rightly mentioned, we are like hard on the outside, but soft and pushy on the inside. But you need to make that relationship and then people will become your advocates. Calling back what you said, like you make that success work in that cluster, and that cluster will become your advocate for other regions within that particular region. So I totally can relate with you on this. We will actually focus on one of those questions which is like a cliche for every founder, it's like, what kind of challenges are you facing currently? I mean, like Locofast has now been in like operation for quite some years, and you've raised your Series A, and you're expanding to other regions and all. But what are those major challenges which you're facing internally with respect to building the brand? And you could focus on such challenges which are quite common for other B2B marketplaces, not just for Locofast, but also it could be similar for other B2B marketplaces. If you could shed some light on that.
I think I think obviously current challenges, obviously we've been around for a while, which means that some of the challenges that we are facing are probably more scale-led, right? Which is that how are you able to replicate the same level of experience, customer experience, same level of efficiency at scale, right? So I think we are beginning to, now with scale, we are beginning to have some of the scale challenges. But in general, if your question is in general B2B, and especially for a lot of viewers who might be early on in their journey, pre-seed or seed stage, right? I think the fundamental thing is really about the product market fit, right? You know, often what we know is that I think it's easy to identify a large industry. Textile as an industry is very, very large, right? There are multiple billion-dollar opportunities within the textile industry, right? I just feel what is important is for you to figure out the business model and the exact business that you're going to do within that industry, right? I think that took us as well time to kind of fine tune and then start executing it, because the last thing you'd want to do is as a seed stage startup or a pre-series startup is that you invest a lot of time and money into a business model that you eventually want to pivot, and then you may not have the energy or may not have the resources to do that, right? So I just feel it's very important. While industry identification is easy, I think business model within those industry takes time to figure out. I think that's probably one. Two, obviously, I think hiring a quality team. I mean, having co-founders. I mean, I'm lucky to have my co-founder from my previous company with me, which makes because some of the journeys are, you know, you might be a first-time entrepreneur, second entrepreneur, whatever your time of entrepreneur you could be, but ultimately some of these journeys are hard. You obviously need somebody by your side whom you can completely trust and know that, you know, you are in this together. So I think finding a right co-founder. Third, in terms of general, I think being able to have the first 50 team members that basically are with you, because early on the journeys are very different, right? You know, and as founders, you obviously expect the moon, you know, you expect everyone to be like you, right? And I think we are really lucky to have a lot of team members of ours who stuck around with us for a long time. And in some way, they've even started using the founders' lingos within the office. So I think we're lucky to have that. But then I think it just requires you to, you know, communicate a lot more with the team, and especially with COVID and work from home scenarios. I think over communication with the teams, you know, being hands-on, setting on examples yourself are some of the things that we've successfully been able to do for us to have a really quality team that is still with us and we continue to grow. And I think so these are just very top level 2-3 you know, problems that we face while scaling up. Today, if you see, I think if I were to pick up, I think two of the biggest problems, one is obviously hiring. I think if we could get more motivated individuals across both tech, product, as well as the business side, I think that would be a great thing. Two, I think definitely, I think as we scale, some of the things that we had anticipated, or some of the process that we had set for our first sort of 12 months have now beginning to break somewhere. So I think as founders, you know, you're basically just trying to stitch together some of the processes that have been broken because of the scale, right? So I just feel that's probably the current biggest problem we are facing, is that with scale, you know, we want to ensure that the same level of customer experience, the same level of efficiency exists, which is where we are spending a considerable amount of time in putting together teams, you know, program managers, you know, our ops heads, to be able to ensure that, you know, the next phase of the journey that we have is basically built on solid processes, you know, built on the same level of experience that we've given to the first 100 customer, and want to give the same customer to the next thousands of customers that we ultimately end up serving. So yes, the two problems that we're facing, these are the two biggest problems that we're facing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, it's all about the right team and the right processes. It might sound very straightforward, but
Oh,
it's more complex than it looks like. Even larger companies face that. People who have gone IPO face that. So yeah, I can totally get that. So we will just pick one or two questions from the audience. We have a question from Selva. So he goes like this. So this is a more labor-intensive industry, and automation is a little possibility. So how do you go about ensuring quality and commitment when it comes to order execution or delivery?
so I think one of the most beautiful aspects, and at the end of the day, if you see, at the end of the day, we are all human beings, right? Our customers, ourselves, our team members, our vendors, right? What we've realized is that if you help people succeed in attaining their goals, for a vendor, it could be getting more business, right? I think they're always there to make you win, right? So I think at a fundamentally, and I've run marketplaces, both B2C, B2B, the moment you give business to your partners, I think they then become, and they then take and share the responsibility of ensuring that the product that they give you is of the right quality and meet the commitment that has been offered to the customer. But beyond that, definitely we have a lot of processes, both a mix of processes which are our on-ground processes, which is we ensure that the vendor who gets onboarded actually we have a 20-point criteria on how we onboard a vendor in terms of quality parameters, turnover, his customer base, his utilization levels, his current earning potential, his empty capacity, the list of 20 points that we look at before we onboard a particular vendor. And two, even at an order basis, I think we have quality checks that we have both before dispatch, during transit, and also post facto if there's a customer complaint that we receive. So I think some of these are inherently baked into our processes, which is what I spoke about, some of the processes that we are scaling with us. But I think the larger view really is that I think if your onboarding processes are clear, and if you are making your vendors make more money through your platform than the next available option, then what I feel is that people and vendors are there to support you and basically solve this themselves and ensure that customer satisfaction is as much as in their hands as it is in our hands.
Got it. Make sure you go ahead and help them within their business. Then obviously, if they're getting more business, then obviously they're going to make sure I'm delivering the right quality at the right time.
Absolutely.
Probably the next follow-up question to this, given that you did mention about the onboarding cycle, I mean, that's a quite exhaustive thing, right? Think about an MSME, you have a 20-point checklist, also looking at the entire inventory they have, when they would actually finish that inventory, their capacity, and so on and so forth. So this is an extensive process. And it might look straightforward on our B2B marketplace where you go place an order, but typically these are longer sales cycles, right? So when you look at it from the other end, so from a manufacturer's end, how do you ensure, or what are the practices do you have in place to ensure the sales life cycle is as smaller as possible and the delivery is met from a platform perspective or from a marketplace perspective from your end? How do you, what are some practices which you have in place for that?
So I think unlike, B2C, like I said, B2C marketplace, a lot of things could be automated, and the degree of automation on B2C could be a lot higher because you're ultimately going to build technology, or you're going to build processes that will have few millions of customers coming on the platform. But in B2B, it's slightly different because, at one moment you may have 10 or 100 or 200 or 500 customers, right? And not few millions, right? So by design, I think they are two different marketplace approach, which then means with higher average order value, with a lot fewer customers, what you end up doing is that basically there is also involvement of our internal teams in managing customer expectation and supplier expectations, right? So I just feel I would say that our processes and our teams and the level of interaction that they have with our customers and vendors is far deeper, right? Which is their relationship becomes very, very important. So that is one core aspect of it. In terms of our product and technology, we do build out a lot of tools for our set of customers or our set of suppliers, because that's where you need to set a lot of process setting needs to happen, which is obviously done at the back of technology, right? So if you really see, to your point, it's basically the setting of processes is basically doing a lot more interaction than a B2C marketplace. It is basically setting up technology to, build a lot of tools for both our internal teams as well as our external partners. And then it requires a lot of coordination between these partners to ensure that the delivery outcome to the customer is actually second to none, right? So it's it's a complex mesh of our internal team's effort, our supply team efforts, our logistic team efforts, all of them, using technology that we've built in-house, all the technology that is basically built around the process gaps that we see. So, all of these things basically come together to be able to move large quantities of material in shorter duration from one part of the country to basically the other part of the country, right?
Yeah, totally makes sense. Well, we are kind of coming to the end of the session. Folks, if you have any questions for Deepak, please do put it on the Q&A section or on the chat section. We'll pick it up. I just have like a couple of questions from my end. When I was reading about Locofast, the first thing I came across was you are going to EU and US. You're setting up operations over there. So how is this happening, and what are you planning to do in EU and US? How is this industry outside India? And we know that this is a quite unorganized sector in India. But when you're looking at expansion to EU, US, are you looking at MSMEs over there? Are you looking at manufacturers over there, so that you're creating the GTM pipeline for MSMEs in India, for manufacturers in the US and EU? So what is this expansion of Locofast?
So if you see, from a textile perspective, the world is divided into two parts. One is basically all the SMEs and manufacturers are based in Southeast Asia, India, China. And if you see outside of China, India is the factory of the world in some way, right? And India is the largest producer of cotton in the world.
Yeah.
Second largest producer of silk in the world, third largest producer of rayon, fourth largest producer of polyester, right? So with especially the COVID implications on China, I think a lot of supply chain has become reliant on India for its raw material needs. And which is where I think we are sitting in the hub of supply, which basically means that we have a lot of manufacturers here, a lot of vendors here that could actually fulfill both the domestic as well as international demand. We've done the first leg of our business where we've successfully been able to have a large client base in India. And with the funding that we've done, I think we've most of the EU and US customer base that we look at will predominantly be more brands, which is where we have very soon we'll have sales team that will be based out of both these locations and actually trying to work closely with the brands in terms of their fabric innovation, in terms of their requirements, in terms of discovering new styles. Some of these things are in the pipeline as we speak. So yes, I think over the next 12 months we will have presence in both these regions through our sales teams. Predominantly, we would work closely with mid and large-scale brands, both in EU and US, over the course of 9 to 12 months.
Awesome. Great. There are two controversial questions. I'm not going to touch that. I will just pick one question. I will answer this question to Dr. Vishnu because he's trying to understand what does Locofast do. So Locofast is mostly for B2B, not the customer facing part. It is mostly business to business facing. It's not like India Mart where you go ahead and order. India Mart is again B2B plus B2C, but Locofast is mainly B2B. I hope I answered your question. Coming to Prashant's questions, quite straightforward. You did touch upon it a little bit, but how did you go about getting your initial few customers? What was the journey of getting those, say, the first 5 or 10 customers?
Well, I think the journey in B2B especially for the first 5 customers, they have to be your friends of friends of friends, references, close network, people that you may have worked with, people you may have studied with. Incidentally, I come from the city of Faridabad, where at least 3 of my classmates are into some form of textile business or the other. So I think they were generous enough to at least train me in their manufacturing facilities to be able to ask them all the questions that I had, to be able to actually service them, in the first avatar. So definitely, I think the first 2-3 customers I served were my friends that were actually procuring textiles or bulk textiles from outside. I mean, we thought that we offered them a product at a price. Obviously, we were first few transactions, we said, okay, we are not going to make margins on that. We're just going to sell cost to cost to at least get it started. So yeah, the first couple of customers were our friends, and then the other three basically were their friends eventually, right? So it's always there. I think it obviously helped coming from an industrial city where we already had customers in the city, right? So especially NCR, I think NCR is one of the largest export women wear market globally, which means that a lot of fashion products are manufactured in NCR. So I think wherever, with our base location being NCR, I think we had a lot of access to customer base. So it was obviously an advantage being based here. But yes, the first two were direct friends, and the other three were friends of friends who actually got us business and got us started.
So many years down the line, you didn't even forget that this happened. True. Look at your inner circle. I think inner circle is the answer for your first few customers. So
absolutely.
We'll take the last question. And I think this is quite interesting and important because I was also interested to know this from Sudhakaran. So is integration with legacy core applications that manufacturers are currently working on. So do you integrate with manufacturers' applications, or it is just the marketplace? Because typically manufacturers tend to use these old tools in place, or you must have to build something specially to integrate with them. So is that in place for Locofast now today, or you're planning to do that later?
So if you look at most of the SMEs, I think 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, apart from running an accounting software, I think there is very few softwares that some of the SMEs on ground use. So definitely we do have integrations on the accounting software bit to answer the question on the integration that we do. But I think the idea for us is that as we move ahead, I think we are adding a lot of additional layers on top of our core marketplace product. It could be either a CRM layer, or it could be just a general layer of collecting payments, or it could be just a simple layer of making payments. So I think we are making some of the additional tools, especially on the CRM side and the payment side, which will help them run even some of the other processing the business outside of the marketplaces on our platform. So yes, I think we are integrated with their accounting softwares and some of these other tools we are going to build. We are building in-house, which our customers would be able to use along with the accounting software that they use. So yes.
Awesome. Yeah, that is a challenge, but yeah, it's not the case in most of the cases because it's very quite straightforward, CRM or accounting software. So yeah,
yes.
Thank you for that. All right, we are at the end of the session. Deepak, thank you so much for making time and answering all these questions. Folks, if you have more questions, feel free to send it across to us. We will trouble Deepak via email and try and get those answers for you. And keep a lookout for Locofast. They're doing some awesome work, and they're also hiring if someone is looking out. So please do reach out to the team. And we will trouble you again probably at a bigger platform and get more folks from the B2B marketplace space and try and get more answers from you once Locofast has reached that Series D, Series C, and probably IPO. And then, looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Deepak, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sri. Such a pleasure. And thanks for the kind words. Really enjoyed my conversation with you and the rest of the Freshworks team. Wishing you guys best of luck, and happy to stay connected, happy to help in any way I can, and happy to engage in any way that we could.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a nice day. Take care.
Thank you so much.